It's been a watershed moment for politics. The murder of Henry Nowak has exposed the dysfunctionality and cancer within our institutions. The safety of society as a whole has been abandoned. The left wants to get rid of data because that proved whether something was right or not. Baroness Casey found ethnicity data was only recorded in a third of the cases. Bridget Phillipson, yet again, she wants to bring in EDI and this anti-racism into schools. I think she could well be the most radical member in the cabinet.
Hello and welcome to the Daily Expresso. Well, with Esther McVey, our very own Westminster Whisperer, let's talk about the week in politics.
Well, it's been a watershed moment for politics. The murder of Henry Nowak has exposed the dysfunctionality and cancer within our institutions. It's also revealed the extent to which radical left-wing ideology has grown and has trumped logic. So we've got to an insane position that a young boy who had been stabbed could be left to die and handcuffed by police as his murderer accused him of racism.
And this left-wing agenda isn't new.
No, it isn't new. It has grown, though, over, I'd say, 25 years. And I'm going to explain what were the key incidents, what were the key pieces of legislation that has allowed this ideology basically to infiltrate schools, universities, and our institutions.
And Henry Nowak's parents have said they don't want this to be political.
That's right, they have. But it will need to be political. It has to be political because it's got to be stopped by politicians to get rid of this anti-racism theory within police, within organisations. We've got to get the police back policing and not fearful of being called racist in one way or another. This critical race theory that started off in America, in universities, has now permeated our whole country and everything that happens here. And you know what? I'm also going to mention something else that happened at the start of the week, which I think flows from and is part of the problem. And that was the debate on Monday, which 260,000 members of the public called for, because they were calling for data collection of people who had sexually abused children and rape gangs as well. Because for too long, people have shied away from saying it like it is, which means people have got away with the most heinous acts. So we talked about, and it came out clearly in Baroness Casey's report, she said there had been systematic failings because we are frightened to talk about ethnicity, we're afraid to talk about nationality, and this petition in particular also called for immigration status to be revealed, because this was at the heart of why, which came out not only in the Casey inquiry but also the Jay inquiry, the reason rape gangs had been allowed to carry on for so long and get so big is because nobody dared question these Muslim communities, these mainly Pakistani men who were committing these crimes.
I must say, Keir Starmer's name rhymes with a lot of things, but it does feel like two-tier Keir is going to be his legacy. Do you agree?
It will be his legacy. And again, we'll start with he'd just come into office and the very first thing that happened was the Southport murders, the murder of 3 young kids there. And people talked about the protection that Axel Rudikabana was given to, hide for a period of time his identity. And then people compare and contrast with what happened to Lucy Connolly, who we know put up a terrible text on social media, updated something terrible. And she apologised, she took it down. She got 31 months of imprisonment, and how she was treated. And this is where people are saying there's this two-tier sort of feeling all the time, not just in policing, but sentencing too. And then after that, we also found out a little bit about the Southport murderer, how his teacher had said he was sinister, how health workers had talked about, this was the black lad who carried knives, how it was escalating, and they got told to remove this because it was racist to talk about that. And so all of this information that had been gathered about what a danger he was to society was lost because all of a sudden it could be deemed as racist, and that trumped how dangerous he was to the public at large. And then he commits these heinous crimes. He kills 3 young girls. And then on top of that, I don't know if you remember the killing in Nottingham, the Nottingham killer. That was Valdo Calacane, a paranoid schizophrenic who murdered 3 people and nearly murdered another 3 people. And again, people had said he should have been put in a mental sort of a facility, and people stopped that. Health workers stopped that because they said, there's too many black young men in there and it looks racist if we put him in there again, or we put him in there. And again, what has happened? The safety of society as a whole has been abandoned for fear of somebody being called racist.
And all these tragic cases begs the question, how on earth did we end up here?
Well, it does. And as I said, it hasn't been quick in coming. It has gathered up for some time. So we look back and we say the first instance was possibly the McPherson report. And this was after the murder of Stephen Lawrence. And the report concluded in 1999 that the investigation was marred by a combination of professional incompetence, institutional racism, and a failure of leadership. Now, at the time, this was needed. Everybody agreed with this. This was a terrible, terrible incident that had happened. And again, as he said, this investigation had been marred. So we had that. Things were put in place. Things were getting corrected. Now, I'm going to bring up a piece of legislation that came out in 2010, and that was the Equalities Act. And a lot of it flows from that. And this is embedding into our legislation what people deemed at the time as equality. Now, you've got to go back to that period of time. It's the end of Blair. We've now got Brown in, but it is that whole Blair government which is run again by that human rights lawyer, that fraternity. What was Blair's wife? Sherry Booth. She was a human rights lawyer. And I'm going to give excerpts of a speech at the time as the act was coming into being. And I will give this because people are starting now to put it out on social media. It was my husband's speech, Philip Davis, and this is what he said in the debate. If it were truly about equality, we would not need 250 pages of politically correct gobbledygook. It would be a very short bill which would simply enshrine that people, and at this instance he was talking about jobs and work, that people would be selected on merit alone. But, he goes on to say, this is the most incredibly misleading title bill, as one of its central planks is not to enshrine equality in law, but to introduce discrimination into the workplace. How right he was. This was 2010. This was the sort of Brown, sort of dying days. And Philip Davis, a conservative who said this, was absolutely vilified because the new religion was equality, diversity and inclusion. It was human rights, as I said, it was the new religion. And not many people agreed with him. But he was saying, and I have to say, Philip Davis is incredibly logical. He isn't emotional. That's what he was. And these human rights lawyers sort of seized on it, and it became a gateway to an industry, an EDI industry, a legal industry, and that's what happened there. And then after that, so you've got that, one thing that happened was the George Floyd incident in America. So this is roll forward to 2020. Mm-hmm. Now, this in the UK, again, was seized upon by the human rights lawyer, which is also now our Prime Minister, Keir Starmer.
Who famously took the knee over the issue.
Within 15 days of him dying. He didn't say anything for 175 days. However, he felt he could say something after the Southport murders about people like Lucy Connolly, and he didn't have a problem with that, about these, right-wing extremists who were putting stuff up online. There would have been ongoing cases for that. So I don't think we can say that. No, he chose not to say something for 175 days, and it's taken him until today to meet the parents. So we've got Starmer taking the knee many times. He's also did a comment about the burning injustices. You had Sadiq Khan, another human rights lawyer, rightly ignited by fury, and you got Shabana Mahmood saying, I share the anger of this unspeakable outrage. So you've got this happening the other side of the world, and this seems to be also what turbocharged all of this EDI, all of this critical race theory, all of this academic studies now coming into our everyday life. And that is what, as I said, turbocharged the fear of racism.
And it does feel like it has been embedded slowly into our institutions, whether that's police, whether that's universities, the health system, it's everywhere.
And councils. And the Taxpayers Alliance did a research into how fast it was growing and the size of it. And in the EDI roles in police went up by almost a third in just 3 years, from 2021 to 23-4. And that sort of shows the speed with which it was gathering momentum. And you've got Derbyshire Police with a head of equalities and human rights, positive action officers. You've got whether it was Merseyside Police, whether it was West Yorkshire Police, and anybody questioning this critical race theory would be closed down. It was a cancel culture. It became sort of authoritarian the way it was handled should you question it. And I think, again, when we look back, so you've got the 2010 Act coming through, but I'd say it was like a long tail following through. So you've got the Act coming through, it then going to the institutions, it then being taught in schools, it then being taught at universities, it then being taught at the College of Policing. And that's why, although you got a Conservative government, it did bloom and blossom under the Conservative government because it had just been put into legislation, and almost an avalanche and a tsunami of people being trained in it, then getting to the top of their professions to talk about it and push this ideology onto the rest of us.
You might have noticed I like to wear this gold watch, gold bangle and gold wedding ring. Gold is physical. It can't be hacked, digitally manipulated or printed into existence by governments. That's why I'm backing today's sponsor, the Pure Gold Company, which helps people buy UK minted gold coins like Britannia's and Sovereign's tax-free, and they've built a really strong reputation for their no-pressure approach and expert guidance. Now, they were even voted the UK's best gold broker. So if you want to understand more about buying physical gold and whether it's right for you, download their free guide to buying gold at the link below. By the way, mention my name, JJ, and for 6 months, you'll get secure storage for free. And also remember, the value of gold can rise as well as fall. So if you're not sure about investing, please do seek independent advice.
And it's worth saying that all of this was compounded by the introduction of the Police Race Action Plan, which was updated last year. And I really quickly want to read you one of the lines from that. The police's anti-racism commitment does not mean treating everyone the same or being colourblind.
Well, that in itself is a load of nonsense. Because that is not your Martin Luther King, so we need to be colourblind, everybody's been to be treated fairly and equally. It's saying quite the reverse. But when you read through this, which most people didn't, and the police anti-racism commitment was updated in 2025 under this government. But I even looked at this. What is anti-racist? I thought to myself, why wouldn't you just say not racist, removing racism? No, this shows an overcompensation. I looked at other words and it's called racial equity, not racial equality, but racial equity. And you can almost feel a vengeance within this. And it's not fact anymore. It's talking about lived experiences. Whether they're true or not, it is how you perceived what went on. So all of a sudden, objectivity and fact has gone out the window, and all of a sudden it's my belief, my journey, my truth, which links to, which is all coming together at the same time, how they got rid of data. The left wanted to get rid of data because that proved whether whether something was right or not. That's the actual core facts on whether it's true or not. They wanted to get rid of that. And here's key things which should have raised alarm bells. Things like anti-racism demands that we are proactive, which is consistent with our legal duties. We must remain vigilant. We must seek it out. It's as if you are looking for racism, whether it is there or not. You will sort of seek it out. And that was why people felt concerned. And even an academic wrote a paper, Dr. David Harris at Plymouth Marjon University, questioning whether you really could have this critical race theory, in the UK. He just questioned it. He lost his title, having worked in the university for 37 years. And this was in 2024. You could not question this at all. And I think that just sort of exposes the sort of fear everybody was living under, that like being racist was the worst possible thing ever.
I want to touch on something you said there about police officers and lived experience. So quite shocking figures released today reveal that 1 in 7 officers and staff felt controlled and pressured to adopt certain ideas after the mandatory diversity training. And that's a survey from the force that arrested Henry Nowak. Complaints against the police force are also skyrocketing year on year. They're steadily rising, with almost 95,000 complaints in 24-25. And I've been speaking to some police sources this week who tell me there is a fear about being reported for racism.
All of these should be warning signs. If you ran a business or an organisation, there are certain things you look for, whether it's complaints, whether it is you losing staff, high turnover, which we've seen in the police as well, days off sick, them feeling under pressure, not happy, nobody's listening to them. So those should have been warning signals to everybody. The police are saying it, the public are saying it, they're making complaints, they're not feeling happy. Those should have been it. But what we'd got to a position where white privilege was what was being taught. Classes, lessons, you must understand white privilege. And there is an inherited, as it were, racial guilt. And the reason I want to talk about this, I remember being really angry at the time, and this again goes back to December 2020. Bernardo's got in touch with me, and they were putting forward policy ideas, and what they wanted to do was teach white privilege to the parents and grandparents of people coming through Bernardo's. And I said, stop right there. And the reason they approached me, I was a Bernardo's kid till I was 4.5. So I was in care till I was 4.5. And I said, in whose planet can you tell children from Bernardo's they have got white privilege? These kids, these families are some of the least privileged there is. That's why they're going to you for help and support. You can't look after your kids. You might not be able to feed them. You might not be able to house them. You might not be able to look after them. And you think a top priority for kids in care is white privilege. I said, this is an absolute disgrace. And I wrote an article about it. And actually, people made complaints to the Charity Commission, because I said, you are bringing in political doctrine into a charity, which is absolutely wrong, and trying to indoctrinate some of the most underprivileged kids in society.
And it's fascinating. To loop back to something you said earlier about data collection having stopped. If you don't collect the data, you don't know how serious an issue is. And this came to the fore for me last year. I did an investigation where I approached the CPS and the Home Office, the Crown Prosecution Service and the Home Office, and I asked them how many asylum seekers are committing sexual offences. And Esther, they didn't know because they don't hold the data.
And this, again, is the dismantling of society. And why I keep going back to this hard left-wing radical ideology, and it is called critical theory, because what they want to do is be critical of something to dismantle it so they can rebuild a world in their likeness, what they want, because they see harm in, as they call them, power structures, in inherent pirated, whether it's colour, whether it's money, whether it's race, whatever it is, and they're dismantling everything, you see. And you can do that if you get rid of data and facts. And that's why they don't want it. And as I said, the rape gang inquiry exposed the lack of data. So in the debate on Monday, they had figures from 2012. The Children's Commissioner on Grooming Gangs found that 79% of data was collected. By 2025, Baroness Casey found ethnicity data was only recorded in a third of the cases. So bit by bit, people are not gathering the data. So, of course, when you put your FOI in, and actually, why should you have even have had to have put in a freedom of information request? Because that means you couldn't find the information.
It wasn't publicly available.
It was gotten rid of, and you had to even go a step deeper as a journalist to try and ascertain that information. I will tell you now, though, Steph, it is worse in some places because they have eradicated the information. You cannot even do an FOI for the information because it's like they've got rid of it. And I will say, a bit like Morgan McSweeney, Starmer's advisor, got rid of his phone. Okay, maybe it was stolen from him, but that got rid of information. A bit like now with the Mandelson inquiry.
Disappearing messages.
Messages.
Not on WhatsApp.
You know why? Because you cannot then hold people to account if they have got rid of the evidence, and that's what we're talking about.
And talking about holding people to account, what about this defund the police movement and the impact that's had?
Yeah. So again, remember, we get back to the George Floyd incident. We go back to, again, the human rights lawyers, your Starmers, your Sadiq Khans, taking the knee, the Black Lives Matters movement, and people associated to that was defund the police. So defund the police is they will view it, and again, it's another left-wing ideology. They're saying, get rid of the police. It's all because these people are victims. They've had a difficult life, and you want the money from the police going to housing or going into mental health or going into the local community. Now, I don't have a problem. Of course, money should be in housing and helping people getting jobs and good education and the local community and youth centres. Absolutely. But not at the expense of the police service and crime. The two are very different. One is helping you, but one is if you have committed crime, usually on your own community, then you must pay the price of that crime. But that left-wing ideology is all about victimhood. Nobody is ever responsible for what has gone on. And for a lot of people who are common sense people who see things logically, they don't understand that. And that is another reason all of this has managed to creep up on us for so long, because we say, well, it doesn't make sense. Of course you need the data and the facts, hence 260,000 people called for this debate on Monday. Of course we need the facts. If we don't know the facts, how can we even know if this is right or wrong? So we don't know if it's immigrants who've committed those crimes and what percentage, and is it an elevated number of crimes by those people if we don't have the data. And equally, the opposite side can say, oh, no, it's not, it's just you being racist. Oh, it wasn't about their ethnicity, rape gangs. You know, it wasn't about their ethnicity for any crimes committed. And then you're in this fog, this gloop of unknown, and it's who shouts the loudest or who is the most authoritarian. And that's why the left or authoritarian question us, and you're morally wrong. This is sort of absolutely irresponsible questions. How dare you? So you will see they will always take the moral high ground, but get rid of any data that could question it. It's really, really dangerous where we've gone down. And I say, thank goodness we've had this reckoning. Thank goodness the public, and it's been over a couple of years since Starmer's been in, said, well, that doesn't seem right. Why did somebody for a tweet get 31 months? And why haven't these people been brought to account? And hang on a sec. Why is this person being allowed to stay in our country, although it's raped a child in this country, and we're not sending them back home? Oh, because they've said their human rights, if they go home, could be anything from they're going to be treated badly, anything to the kid can't eat chicken McNuggets back home because they don't do them the same. What a load of nonsense. And that's why this public outcry is needed. That's why the most saddest thing and seared in our memory for all time is that horrible police body camera evidence that we've now seen with our eyes, the insanity that has flown from not being allowed to say, I'm being stabbed to death, look after me. No,
I can't breathe.
I can't breathe. It was because you were meant to be racist. And we've looked at that as if being racist, hurty words were more important than physical violence and somebody dying. And that's the nonsense of what we've got to, which we know as well, don't we, with these non-crime hate incidents, hurty words on Twitter meaning more than the actual crime.
Right, a quick pause in the podcast to tell you about our sponsor, Incogni. You had those phone calls from numbers you don't recognise, or you go in your inbox and there's emails for stuff you did not sign up for. Well, that's because someone somewhere is selling your private information. That's where today's sponsor comes in, Incogni. They will contact these people who have been taking your information and they'll say, oi, stop, delete it. Go to the website, incogni.com, you type in the details, 2 minutes later, Incogni are sorting it out for you automatically. And because I love you, I've got you a discount. It ain't 10%, it ain't 20, 60% off. 60% off an annual Incogni plan. Just go to incogni.com/Daily Expresso or click the link in the episode description box below.
And earlier you mentioned the public and how it's been a wake-up call. Surely they'll see right through Starmer's employment rights reforms and the impact that'll have on undermining the police.
Right, and this is why I don't believe two-tier Keir can resolve these problems, because what he needs to do straight away is get rid of the anti-racism commitment, and that's what people are calling on. Get rid of this anti-racism commitment, and he can't do that. And the reason I know he can't do it, it's not just because he's a human rights lawyer, it's not because he's done this all his life, it is his impetus for being in politics. It is because he is now introducing all of this EDI, this anti-racism, into other things. So as you rightly just said there, the Employment Rights Reform Act under Labour is requiring by law to allow unionised staff to take part in diversity programme during working hours. How is this man going to stop anything when he's pushing this propaganda into the workplace as well now?
And it's not just the workplace, it's schools as well.
Now, this is a disgrace. And absolutely, this is Bridget Phillipson yet again. And I think she could well be the most radical member in the cabinet. When you see what she, the education secretary, when you see what she's put the VAT on schools, she wants to get rid of private schools. But her overhaul of the curriculum is saying that she wants to bring in this again, this EDI and this anti-racism into schools. And I will say this is a hard left anti-white postmodern, as they call it, ideology. It's not colourblind, but it perpetuates systematic inequality, and that seems what she is about.
I must say, I've been so impressed by Kemi Badenoch this week, her grace, her poise, I thought, but also Henry Nowak's family, who've called for peace amid violence in Southampton.
Mm-hmm. And I think it also showed, because you are right, Kemi, absolutely, her words were perfect. She said, I don't want to hear about Black Lives Matter. I don't want to hear about White Lives Matter. I don't want these two competing tribes, as she called it. She said, all lives matter. And that is being truly sort of colourblind. And I will say to you that actually Hillary Clinton said that back in 2015. She was out on a visit and she said it. And she was scolded for saying that. And they were, oh no, at the moment we're talking about Black Lives Matter and that's all you can say. So it has taken from 2015 to now 2026, where people have seen how illogical that is, where what you have done, you haven't got rid of racism, you are vying the two against each other. You've got a seesaw movement going on rather than equilibrium. And so I think Kemi being able to say that, and people for the first time hearing it correctly and agreeing with what she said, because I remember saying it after the Black Lives Matter movement and people didn't want to hear it. And so I just hope that we can get rid of this ideology, but it will require a change of government. It isn't going to happen under Starmer. He keeps saying now, as you say, this calm, this call for calmness, leadership is needed. Well, he ain't got that leadership. He isn't going to change any of this. And we've now got proof he is pushing this through in schools. And Bridget Phillipson is also working with the charity, which is Schools of Sanctuary. She's wanting to bring in more ideology into primary schools, junior schools, secondary schools, saying we welcome immigrants and we welcome illegal, I'll say immigrants and asylum seekers into school. None of this should be there. People just want to know about maths, about English, about geography. We don't want your ideology, Bridget.
Parents certainly don't.
No, nobody does. And until we can get to that state of being colourblind, we have this problem.
Well, thank you so much to you, Esther, our Westminster Whisperer, and thank you to you at home. Please do like, share, subscribe, leave a comment and hit the hype button. We'll be back next week.